Well, hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Well, what I'm doing today is a figure painting. This started out as a mixed media experiment, something I love to do, have loved to do for years. And it really just turned into a standard watercolor study, basically. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about the mixed media that I use, which was pastel pencil and all. There will be a little point which I show you what I did. It didn't really work out, but it worked out pretty well as a watercolor study. What I really wanted to talk about, and this was actually the original thrust of this episode, was doing a detailed drawing and refining your drawing and simplifying your drawing or reducing the detail in your drawing. And I have several techniques that I've used for that. I'm going to demonstrate one today. Here you can see me blocking in this figure. You saw the picture a little ways back. It's actually an 18th century reenactor at Williamsburg, Virginia, in the carpentry shop. And I thought it was a pretty cool pose, pretty neat character to draw. So I'm blocking in the major shapes here, and when you see me hold my pencil up, I'm measuring proportions. You just measure proportions by finding a unit on the figure or in the drawing, like a head, and then comparing everything else to it. So you'll look at the photo and say that figure is 3 heads wide, and then you'll build that proportion into your own drawing. So that's what I'm doing when you see me hold the pencil up. Anyways, I blocked this in. I want to talk about refining because we're going to jump. There's the jump right there. Going to jump into the detail. You go big shapes to little shapes, major shapes to detail. But the most important part of a painting like this is the drawing. I mean, you really need, especially figures. I would say it goes the same with wildlife. Not as much with landscape, but it might be if you're not used to painting landscape. You may want to spend an equal amount of time on a landscape drawing too. Getting a refined drawing is so key. It makes the whole rest of the process easier. Not only that, but you can copy, you can scan, you can do whatever you need to do with the pencil drawing, and if you mess it up, you mess up your painting and go for it again. Now I'm actually drawing right on the watercolor paper. Normally in a finished painting I wouldn't do this, but I'm working out of the B 100% cotton sketchbook, and I don't mind drawing right on the paper and doing a lot of erasures. It's fine. It's going to be a rough study, a loose study. If this were going to be a finished painting that I might frame, I would probably do this on paper, on separate drawing paper. And really that's what I'm considering this sketchbook, as drawing and painting on separate paper. It's just that it allows me to combine the drawing and the painting right in one sketchbook. So this is a preliminary drawing, essentially, where I add paint, if that makes any sense. Anyway, refining your drawing. So that's what we were talking about. And when I do this, I am very careful. I will walk away from this drawing many times, come back to it with a fresh eye. Sometimes a day later. Actually, this is the day before I painted it, and I took many breaks where I just left the room entirely. That's a good point. That's a good tip. With things like the hands, I didn't show it on video, but you can see those hands down there were difficult poses. He's got sort of a carpenter's graphite or marking pencil tucked under one finger on his right hand, and getting the balance of his pose and those hands right to my liking were important. So I spent some time on that. I'm going to spend some time on the face. And I am drawing very lightly, by the way. Very lightly. I can lift with a kneaded eraser very easily just by rolling it over or blotting with it, and then come back and refine those shapes some more. And I don't show it on the video, but at one point I completely erased the head, because after I got through drawing the rest of the body, the head was too long or too big. So this is the time to work out those problems and details. And every artist, except the most phenomenal talent, every artist goes through this. Every artist has adjustments and things they need to fix. And in figurative drawing and painting, it's especially true. Proportions easily show when you get them off. As I work on this, I'm going to put more detail into this than I will finally paint. And that kind of brings me to the other aspect of what I wanted this video to be about. And that's simplifying and reducing detail. As you start drawing in things, like he had an apron or blousey kind of a shirt that was full of wrinkles and details, and here you can see another skip ahead as I've refined these details. I start by drawing most all of them in, and I come back with a reduction step, actually a couple steps, which you'll see coming up. So definitely, as you refine your drawings, go ahead and put some detail in, especially if it's in a mode where you can erase or refine it. I've gone over these hands probably 4 or 5 times now as you see me drawing on them. Getting the fingers right, getting the thicknesses of the fingers right, getting a convincing pose that is the right proportion with the arms. It looks like it's actually propped on that table. Cleaning up the line. A lot of what I'm doing in areas where I kind of arrived at the detail that I like, I'm cleaning it up. So you'll see that several times throughout here. I will even do a little bit of shading in the deepest areas, or giving my line some weight. I just can't express or emphasize enough the importance of this step. This makes everything else easier, more fun, and more successful as you get down the road to painting. Just spend, one of the things I like to do is get a drawing to a point where I think I like it, then just spend some time looking at it and think, what else can I do to make this drawing better? It's really that important. Now, one of the things I wanted to reduce in detail and spend some time thinking about was all these complex folds in his top, his blousey sort of top. I wanted some of that complexity to end up in the final, but only enough that suggested at all that detail. And there's sort of, where I'm drawing now, there's this stitching going around the upper part of his sleeve. That's easy to get too detailed, so this is an exercise in how do I suggest the most detail and yet put in the least. That's what this exercise is for me. Accuracy, refinement, and getting the amount of detail right. Now you'll see me bring in that not only kneaded eraser with this other small little white eraser. By the way, all of my supplies, as usual, are down in the description. So please look there before you ask me what something is. Quite often I will forget to put something, but most of the time I've been trying to put everything that I use down in the description as a link. It'll take you to Amazon where you can at least see what it is, even if you don't want to buy it. You do support this channel if you buy through that link, but at the very least it shows you what I'm using. So look down there if you wonder what I'm using. That little white eraser, it's a Tombow Mono Zero eraser, is great. It's great for, it's a little bit more aggressive than a kneaded eraser. So you'll see me bring that in, erase back areas so as I refine it. Now I'm switching here to a 0.3 millimeter lead, a finer lead. I had been using a 0.7. Now I'm switching to this 0.3. That's a Pro Mecha Odo mechanical pencil. It's about the finest lead you can get. I have seen some 0.25s, but I think the 0.3 is about the finest lead you'll find. And it's great for cleaning up these kind of drawings. Hopefully you can see this picture, this figure, and all that wonderful detail in his blouse. You can see all that starting to come into focus. I really, really enjoy this process. Part of what I wanted to do in this mixed media experiment was some drawing with pastel pencil. You'll see that step coming up, but Didn't really work out. I think pastel pencil is better used on top of watercolor instead of underneath it. But these kind of experiments are just the mixed media experiments that I love to play with sometimes. It's really served me well over the years. And I'm going to do more episodes on this channel with mixed media, with watercolor sort of as the home base still, bringing other media into it. Something I had planned to do more of starting this year. But I think you can see well what this process is. It's just refining the lines, erasing back the sketchier parts, continuing to clean up, continuing to eliminate. Wherever I can, I eliminate detail that's superfluous. And you're going to see a couple more steps along that line. In fact, I'm also thinking towards what parts of the drawing I can drop out completely. How drastically can I take that? Now, in the end, I didn't take that as far as I thought I might, but I'm going to end up with a copy, a scan, and a tracing where I can do this over as another painting. Now, here's my next step of reduction, and I like this process. There's a number of ways to do this. You can do it on a light pad or light tablet. I like to do it with tracing paper. You can even do this electronically. I like tracing paper because I can add the detail, the parts that I want, rather than subtract the detail that I don't. Sometimes it's just a different way of thinking. When you add, you're just drawing in the essential parts. And I like tracing paper because it allows me to really draw. You know, I don't think of this in terms of tracing. I think of more in terms of reinterpreting the drawing that I already have. Here's another way you can do it. I won't go into detail, but you can scan your drawing. And I've done this so many times as an illustrator. Get yourself a good scan. If you're handy with Photoshop, bring it into Photoshop. Add a mask, a layer mask. If you're a Photoshop aficionado, you know what those are. They allow you to erase non-destructively or add things or whatever. But in this case, I'm erasing, but it doesn't affect the drawing because it's on a mask. You can see where I've erased part of the arms, and I'm just experimenting with how dropping out whole parts of the drawing will look. So anyway, I'm not going to go use that technique here. Instead, I'm going to go back to this. This is something anybody can do, whether you're proficient at Photoshop or not. And right there's the reason. You see how I lift that up? It's like I can instantly lift it and tell what my drawing is, my new iteration. Producing essentially a new iteration of that same drawing. And in the process, I'm reducing detail, I'm cleaning up detail, I'm refining the drawing. At some point when I get enough of it, I'm going to remove this entirely. I just have it tacked up there with removable Scotch tape. And I'm penciling in just a few background elements. I'm going to treat that background in a very impressionistic way. Just very suggestive as to, tools laying on a bench. It's a very cluttered, very well-used carpentry workshop here. See that lifting again? Okay, now I've removed that tracing completely from my sketchbook and I'm drawing. This is another thing I think is key. If you trace from photos, if you don't feel competent enough to draw from your photos, that's acceptable. Draw as much of it as you can. In other words, only trace to get proportions. If you're still not comfortable with that, then trace a few more details. Remove that tracing from your photo and then draw in as much as you can. Use the tracings only to get you a little further down the road, not to provide everything. Tracing can be a big benefit. I hope you'll go see my buddy Mark Campbell's latest video on that. I think it was really well done. Talks about all the benefits of tracing. And there is just a fallacy going. It's started by some, I don't know, amateur artists out there that tracing is cheating. They don't know what they're talking about. Here you see me adding some shading, some simplified shading to the tracing. And again, that's sort of telling me, and I hope you can tell how much detail I have reduced through that tracing. Now what I'm doing is going back to my watercolor sketch pad and taking that tracing that I did as a guide and using it to reduce and erase detail on this finished drawing that I will actually paint over. But the great part is I have that trace. I fully intend to do this painting in a bigger format out of a sketchbook, so I have that tracing for later. Now I'm going to lighten everything, and you can see this is very effective for lightening pencil, especially if you drew very, very lightly. This is just an HB lead, but you just roll or blot with your kneaded eraser. Here's the mixed media experimental part, and I have these great Faber-Castell Pitt pastel pencils. I wanted to try some experiments using them with watercolor, and I thought maybe I'd do some drawing and sort of linear hatch work with them and then do watercolor on top of that, see how that worked. I'll just tell you right now, it didn't really work. Watercolor pretty much covered up the pencil, especially in the face here. I mean, to the point you really couldn't tell where the linear aspects were. Here you can see me doing more of it. It was fun. Kind of made an interesting pastel pencil study, before I added the watercolor. Something I want to play with a little more. And maybe what I should have done is just use the watercolor in just a few little places, or made the marks more linear. I don't know. In the end, when I got finished with the painting, you really couldn't see it. So that's fine. That's what experiments are for. And I just love experimenting with mixed media. But we're just going to continue with this as a watercolor painting, and it really, really was fun to do. Again, getting back to that refinement stage. When you really spend time doing your drawings, getting them right, taking the time, taking breaks, looking at them several different ways, this process right here will be so much more fun. And it goes for any kind of painting. I do a lot of spontaneous landscapes. That's only because I've been painting them for so long. They're a little more organic. But if you don't draw landscapes very well, if you don't draw flowers very well, then spend some time doing that portion of it, whether you're tracing it or what. Get them right and enjoy the painting process more. Mostly throughout this painting, I just kind of dabbed and daubed. I wanted to use this flat. It's a Da Vinci Cosmotop Spin flat. Just for the brushstroke shapes that it would leave. They're a little more interesting, or they're a little more designy, expressive, I guess you might say. It's about a 1/4 inch flat, I guess. Flats work pretty well for giving interesting brush strokes, and you have a corner which will give you some detail, and you have a sort of an edge that allow you to put in linear detail. So I can do a lot of it with this flat. Even down here, this hand, you can see. Here's where the pastel pencil sort of messed me up. This face ended up getting too dark. The reenactor was a Caucasian male. It ended up looking more like a dark-skinned person, which is fine, but wasn't the original intent. And it turned out darker than I would have done had I not used that pencil. There was kind of a neat two-tone light source, one coming in through that open door over to the right of the picture, and then there was an open door you can't see to the left. And I decided to really emphasize and exaggerate that light coming from the left side of the picture. So I wanted that to almost look blown out. Having highlights that look kind of blown out, that's a photographic term. That just means overexposed, if you don't know what that means. But having highlights that look overexposed or blown out, I think is just a really interesting effect in watercolor. I like it if it's dramatic. I really just wanted to have some design elements, abstract expressionistic sort of design elements to the background. So treating that background very suggestive and almost abstract. You know, it's a workbench and probably full of tools, but you can't tell what any of it is. In the end, I was really happy with how that turned out. And just continuing to dab deeper values into certain areas. It may not be evident to the casual viewer, but that tracing and that reduction step is really helping me now, because I have a visual idea. I have an idea implanted in my brain about where I wanted to reduce detail and where I wanted it to just sort of go loose. So those exercises really helped me refine this better than if I had just done this straight up directly from the photo, looking at the photo. I've switched, in case you haven't noticed, I've switched to a round with a very needle point. It's a long round. It's a Silver Brush Golden Natural. They have really good points. You can see there how the face just got a little too ruddy and dark. After I finish this piece, I will end up coming back and sort of fixing that a little bit with gouache, but that's not on video. In reality, that face was pretty well in shadow, so it was pretty dark. But I still don't think it was quite that dark. It doesn't really work. But it's not bad. It's not bad for a study. I wasn't terribly unhappy with it. Especially when I brought some of the shadows and values down in that cap. That sort of seemed to help a little bit. In fact, as I lower the values everywhere and add more shadow detail, it helps make that face, the difference in value in the face and the rest of it helps kind of bring it into balance a little more. Now, this is the great thing. I'm done. I have a copy. This is a digital copy. This is my tracing, detail reduction tracing, and I will keep both of these on file. And I now have, there you can see it better over paper. I now have something to immediately start another painting if I want to, without having to redraw this guy. Here's the finished piece. Did a little bit of lightening and fixing of the face with gouache, but there's the tracing, detail reduction tracing. Pretty happy with it, really happy with that background. How that just kind of went expressive, and it really enhances the detail in the character, so I was very happy with that. Work on those drawings, folks. Can't express it, can't stress it enough, especially in a complicated subject. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoy this. Hope you have some great takeaways, get you excited and inspired. Thank you so much, patrons, for supporting this channel, and we will see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.